The tail lights of my parents' Volvo were just two bleeding red eyes in the dark, fading down the long, gravel driveway until the trees swallowed them whole. Then, silence. That heavy, suffocating silence you only get in the Midwest when the cornfields have been harvested and the wind has nothing to stop it from slamming right into your siding. I stood on the porch, arms crossed over my chest, shivering. It was late October, and the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the last hour. The air smelled like dead leaves and impending frost. "Go inside, Alex," I muttered to myself, turning away from the darkness. "They'll be back Sunday. It's 48 hours. You can do this." I locked the front door. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy thud that echoed way too loud in the foyer. Our house is one of those places realtors call charming, but neighbors call isolated. It's a sprawling Victorian farmhouse about 20 miles outside of town, renovated just enough to have Wi-Fi and heating, but old enough that the floorboards groan like dying animals if you step on the wrong spot. My parents, workaholics to the bone, bought it 3 years ago. They said they wanted peace and quiet. I'm pretty sure they just wanted a place where no one could hear them arguing about whose career was more important. This weekend, they were off to a conference in Chicago. "Networking," my dad had said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Big opportunity, champ. You're in charge. Keep the ship afloat." The ship, in this case, was a 3-story house, and the cargo was Leo. I found my 5-year-old brother in the living room. He was sitting cross-legged on the Persian rug, surrounded by an army of Matchbox cars. He wasn't playing with them, though. He was lining them up. Perfectly straight lines. Red, then blue, then black. Red, then blue, then black. "Hey, bud," I said, forcing a cheerful tone I didn't feel. "Mom and Dad are gone. Just us guys now. You hungry?" Leo didn't look up. He has this mop of blonde hair that always falls in his eyes, and he's small for his age. Fragile looking. "Not yet," he said. His voice was soft, barely a whisper. "Okay. Well, I'm gonna order pizza later." "Pepperoni?" He finally looked up. His eyes are usually this bright, innocent blue, but in the dim light of the living room lamp, they looked almost gray. He doesn't like pepperoni. I paused, leaning against the doorframe. "Who? Dad?" "Dad's not here, Leo. It's just me. And I like pepperoni." Leo turned back to his cars. He picked up a black one and stared at it intensely. "Not Dad. The other one." I let out a short, tired exhale. "Right. The imaginary friend. Is Captain Cool back?" "His name isn't Captain Cool," Leo said, his tone strangely flat. It wasn't the petulant whine of a toddler, it was matter-of-fact. Adult. And he's not imaginary. He lives in the wall. "Okay, sure. Does the guy in the wall want cheese pizza?" I teased, walking over to the couch and flopping down. I pulled out my phone to check Instagram. No service. Of course. The wind must be messing with the satellite again. "He says he's not hungry for pizza," Leo murmured. I ignored him, scrolling through cached photos. This was going to be a long weekend. By 7 p.m., the wind was really picking up. The old house was making its symphony of noises. The radiator clanked in the hallway, the windows rattled in their frames, and the massive oak tree in the front yard scraped its branches against the roof like skeletal fingers trying to pry the shingles off. I made mac and cheese instead of ordering pizza because the internet was down, and I couldn't get a signal to call the delivery place. We sat at the kitchen island. The kitchen is modern, stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, but it always feels cold. Leo was eating slowly, methodically. So, I said, trying to fill the silence. The silence was starting to bug me. It felt heavy, like the air pressure before a tornado. What do you want to do tomorrow? We could build a fort. Watch movies. Leo put his fork down. We have to stay inside. Well, yeah, it's supposed to rain. But we can go out if it clears up. No, Leo said. He looked at the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Outside, it was pitch black. You couldn't see the yard, just your own reflection staring back at you. He says it's not safe outside. The bad things are waking up. I felt a little prickle of unease run down my neck. I hate it when kids say creepy stuff like that. Leo, stop it. There are no bad things. Just raccoons and maybe a coyote. Leo looked at me, and for a second, I swore he looked disappointed. Like I was failing a test I didn't know I was taking. You don't listen, Alex. That's why he's mad at you. Who is mad at me? I snapped, losing patience. The stress of the week, school, exams, my parents leaving, was catching up to me. Your imaginary friend. The other brother, Leo corrected. We don't have another brother, Leo. It's just us. That's what you think, Leo whispered. He picked up his fork and took another bite of macaroni, chewing with a rhythmic, wet sound that suddenly seemed deafening in the quiet kitchen. I stood up abruptly, taking my plate to the sink. The water from the faucet was loud, drowning out the wind for a moment. I scrubbed the plate harder than necessary. Get it together, Alex, I told myself. He's 5. He's coping with mom and dad leaving. Kids make up weird stories. When I turned back around, Leo was gone. The stool was empty. His plate was still half full. Leo. I walked into the hallway. The lights were off in the living room. Leo, come on. It's not funny to hide. The house felt massive. Shadows stretched long and distorted across the floorboards. I walked toward the stairs. The wooden steps creaked under my weight. Leo. I heard a giggle. High-pitched. Coming from upstairs. I took the stairs 2 at a time. My heart was beating a little faster than it should have been. I wasn't scared, not really, but the house had a way of making you feel watched. I reached the landing. The hallway was a tunnel of darkness, with doors on either side. My room, my parents' room, the bathroom, and at the very end, Leo's room. The door to Leo's room was ajar. A sliver of pale yellow light spilled out onto the carpet. I walked down the hall, the floorboards groaning in protest. I pushed the door open. Leo was sitting in the middle of his room, facing his closet. His room was typical for a kid his age: blue walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a toy chest overflowing with plastic junk. But the closet, that was different. It was a walk-in, way too big for a kid's room. The door was white, with slats. Leo was staring at the slats. Leo, I said, exhaling. Don't run off like that. He didn't turn around. He was whispering. I stepped closer, straining to hear. He's here now. Yes. I know. He's bigger than me, but he's scared. I can smell it. I froze. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Leo, who are you talking to? Leo turned his head slowly. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. The other brother. He lives in there. He pointed a small finger at the closet door. Okay, that's enough, I said, my voice firm. Bedtime. Now. I have to open the door first, Leo said, standing up. He wants to come out. No, I said, grabbing Leo's arm gently but firmly. The closet stays closed. There's nothing in there but clothes and boxes. He says you're lying, Leo said. His voice dropped an octave, mimicking an adult cadence perfectly. He says you know about the secret. The one Mom and Dad talk about when they think we're asleep. I stared at him. What are you talking about? The mistake, Leo whispered. The one before me. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty house. Leo, get in bed. I'm serious. I practically lifted him onto his mattress and pulled the duvet up to his chin. He watched me the whole time, his expression unreadable. Good night, Leo. You should lock your door, Alex, he said sleepily, closing his eyes. Why? Because he's jealous. And he has long fingers. I backed out of the room, closing the door until it clicked shut. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. Silence. Then, from inside Leo's room, I heard a sound. Scritch. 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 Like fingernails dragging slowly down the wooden slats of a closet door. I threw the door open. Leo was sound asleep in his bed, breathing rhythmically. The closet door was shut tight. I stood there for a full minute, holding my breath. Nothing. Just the wind howling outside and the settling of the house. My imagination, I whispered. Just the wind. I closed the door again and went to my room. My room is across the hall. I went inside and locked the door, just out of habit, or maybe because of what Leo said. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I had an essay due on Monday about The Great Gatsby, but I couldn't focus. The phrase, the mistake. The one before me, kept looping in my head. My parents were weird about family history. No photo albums from before I was born. No stories about their childhoods. Just the here and now. I always assumed they were just boring people who wanted to reinvent themselves in the suburbs. I put my headphones on and blasted music to drown out the noises of the house. I worked for an hour, managing to type out a few paragraphs. Around 10:30 p.m., I took my headphones off to get a glass of water. The house was silent again. But different. The wind had died down. Now, the silence felt expectant. I unlocked my door and stepped into the hallway. It was freezing. The temperature must have dropped another 10 degrees inside the house. I could see my breath misting in the air. Did the furnace break? I thought, annoyed. I walked past Leo's room. I paused. The door was open. I knew I had closed it. I remembered the click. I pushed it open further. The bed was empty. The covers were thrown back. Leo. Panic flared in my chest. Leo. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I ran down the stairs, my socks slipping on the polished wood. Leo. This isn't funny. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. Then, I felt a draft. A cold, steady breeze coming from the back of the house. I ran to the den. The sliding glass door to the backyard was wide open. The screen door had been ripped off its track and was lying on the patio. I ran to the opening. Leo. And then I saw him. He was standing in the middle of the backyard, near the edge of the woods. He was wearing his pajamas, his bare feet buried in the freezing, dead leaves. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the tree line. I sprinted across the grass, the cold biting through my t-shirt. I grabbed him by the shoulders and spun him around. Leo! What the hell are you doing? It's freezing. He looked up at me. His face was pale, his lips blue. But he was smiling. A wide, stretched smile that looked too big for his face. He called me, Leo said. Who? Leo pointed into the woods. I looked up. The woods were a wall of black trunks and tangled branches. I couldn't see anything. But then, I heard it. A twig snapped. A heavy, deliberate step on dry leaves. Something was in the woods. Watching us. He wants to play, Alex, Leo giggled. He says it's his turn to be the big brother. I scooped Leo up in my arms, he felt heavier than usual, like dead weight, and ran back toward the house. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what cast the shadow that seemed to detach itself from the trees. I slammed the sliding glass door shut and locked it. I threw the deadbolt. I dragged a heavy armchair in front of it. I was panting, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at Leo. He was standing in the middle of the den, shivering. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the reflection in the glass door. Alex, he whispered. What? What is it? Why is your shadow doing that? I looked at the glass. My reflection was there, pale and terrified. But my shadow, the dark shape cast on the wall behind me. It wasn't mimicking my movements. I was standing still. But my shadow was raising a hand, waving hello. I grabbed Leo and bolted for the stairs, the sound of a low, guttural laugh echoing from the walls of the house itself. The game had started, and we were already losing. We scrambled into my room. I slammed the door, locked it, and shoved my heavy oak desk against the wood until it wedged under the handle. My chest was heaving, my breath loud and ragged in the small space. I was terrified that whatever was downstairs could hear the air wheezing in my lungs. Leo sat on the edge of my bed, legs dangling, his face completely void of expression. He looked like he was watching a boring documentary, not like he'd just been standing barefoot in freezing mud talking to ghosts. Alex, Leo said softly. He's mad at you. I wiped cold sweat from my forehead, trying to steady my voice. There's no one down there, Leo. It was a trick of the light. A shadow. Leo looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as if dissecting my thoughts. Grown-ups always lie. Mom and Dad lie. You lie. But he doesn't lie. Who is he? I asked, rummaging through my closet for a spare blanket to wrap around him. Caleb, Leo pronounced the name with a terrifying simplicity. The name hit me like a physical blow. Caleb? Who was Caleb? Where did he get that name? He told me his name, Leo continued, monotone. He said he was supposed to be me. And that, he was here before. A chill, sharper than the drafty house, ran down my spine. The name felt strange, yet disturbingly familiar. Like a word that had been on the tip of my tongue for years but never spoken. Go to sleep, Leo, I said with forced firmness. We'll talk in the morning. Leo fell asleep with unnerving speed, like a switch had been flipped. But I stayed awake. I sat in my desk chair facing the door, gripping my aluminum baseball bat, eyes fixed on the handle. Every sound the house made set my teeth on edge. The refrigerator humming, the wood contracting in the cold, the wind howling again outside. But the worst was the sound I heard around 3 a.m. Footsteps. Not light footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps in the hallway right outside my room. Thud, thud, thud. They stopped directly in front of my door. I held my breath. The brass doorknob began to turn. Slowly. Right, then left. Like someone was testing it gently. When it didn't give, the movement stopped. Then, I heard fingernails dragging down the wood from the other side. Soft, rhythmic scratching. Scryitch, scryitch. Open up, Alex. A whispered, muffled voice, sounding like it was coming from underwater. And it wasn't a stranger's voice. It was my voice. The same pitch, the same inflection, but laced with a cold, malicious undertone. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my hands over my ears. Wake up. This is a nightmare. I'm asleep. When I opened my eyes, the sun was shining. Morning was deceptive. The sunlight was bright, the sky clear after the storm, and the house was quiet and still. The smell of brewing coffee filled the kitchen as I went down to make breakfast. I tried to convince myself the previous night's events were hallucinations born of stress and sleep deprivation. The human mind does strange things under pressure. Leo was in front of the TV watching cartoons, acting as if he'd forgotten everything. He ate his cereal with innocent, sleepy movements. "Morning, buddy," I said, trying to normalize the atmosphere. "Morning," Leo replied without looking away from the screen. I decided I needed a rational explanation for the name, Caleb. If Leo heard it from someone, I had to know who. I went into my father's home office. The study was on the ground floor, usually a forbidden zone. It smelled of old leather and expensive cologne. I started rifling through the desk drawers. Bills, contracts, tax forms, boring, normal life stuff. I was about to close the bottom drawer when I saw a large yellow envelope jammed at the back, under a stack of old magazines. I pulled it out. On the front, in my mother's shaky handwriting, medical records, 2005. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling. 2005, that was 5 years before Leo was born. Long before we bought this house. I pulled out a birth certificate. The name, Caleb Michael Anderson. Date of birth, November 12, 2005. And beneath it, another paper. A death certificate. Same name. Same date. Cause of death, umbilical cord strangulation during delivery. Stillborn. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath me. We had a brother. A brother who died before he took a single breath. My parents had never mentioned him. They had buried this secret for over a decade. But the question that truly terrified me was, how did Leo know? Leo is 5. He couldn't have seen these papers. And there was no way Mom and Dad told him about a dead infant. What are you doing with Dad's stuff? I jumped, spinning around. Leo was standing in the doorway of the office. His face was in shadow, but his eyes were gleaming with a strange, unchildlike intelligence. I was looking for a pen, I lied, trying to hide the envelope behind my back. Leo smiled. But this time, the smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. It made my stomach turn. "You found his paper, didn't you?" Leo said, taking a step into the room. "Caleb is sad they forgot him. He hates being forgotten." "Leo, stop it." I shouted, my nerves finally fraying. "There is no Caleb talking to you. That was our brother, and he died a long time ago. How do you know about this? Did you hear Mom talking?" Leo laughed. It was a short, dry sound, like cracking wood. "He isn't dead, Alex. He just changed. He grew up in the dark. And he's hungry." Suddenly, the heavy office door behind Leo slammed shut with a deafening bang. The overhead light began to flicker violently, buzzing like an angry hornet. Leo, get out! I yelled, lunging to grab him. But Leo didn't move. He stood statue still, looking up at the ceiling. He's here, Leo whispered. Abruptly, the books on the shelves began to fall. One by one. Thump, thump, thump. As if an invisible hand was walking along the shelf, shoving them off. Papers swirled into the air. The temperature in the room plummeted, freezing the breath in my lungs. I grabbed Leo by the arm, dragged him out of the study, and sprinted into the living room. We have to go, I panted. Now. I pulled out my phone to call 911, or anyone. One bar of service. I tried to call my dad. The line connected. Hello? Dad? I screamed into the phone. All I heard was static. Loud, screeching white noise. Dad, listen to me, something is wrong with the house. You have to come back. Through the static, a sound emerged. It wasn't my father. It was the sound of a baby crying. Muffled and choked, as if crying from behind a thick wall. Then, the sound warped into hysterical laughter. A whisper came through the speaker, pressed right against my ear. You took my place, but I'm taking it back. I dropped the phone like it was burning hot. It hit the rug, the screen still glowing. I looked at Leo. He was standing perfectly still, staring at the phone. He cut the landline wires a long time ago, Leo said coldly. And the cars won't start. What are you talking about? I grabbed his shoulders and shook him hard. Leo. Snap out of it. It's me, Alex. Leo looked up at me, and for the first time, I felt that the person looking back wasn't my little brother. His eyes were empty. Completely black. No whites, no blue irises. Just two pits of darkness. Alex is gone, Leo said, his voice rough, an old man's rasp coming from a child's throat. We are playing a new game now. I released him and backed away, terror gripping my throat. You're not Leo. I am both, the thing inside my brother said. I am Leo, and I am the one who should have lived. Suddenly, a sound came from the floor above. From Leo's bedroom. The sound of the closet door creaking open. Creak. Then, the sound of something rolling across the floorboards. Tum, tum, tum. It reached the top of the stairs. Leo and I both looked toward the staircase. A small red rubber ball, one of Leo's toys, bounced down the steps and rolled to a stop at my feet. I lifted my eyes to the top of the landing. There, in the gloom of the upper hallway, a silhouette stood. It was tall, impossibly thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. Its joints looked wrong, jagged and sharp. The shadow raised a long, spindly finger and pointed at me. Beside me, my little brother raised his hand and pointed at me in exact synchronization. Come play upstairs, they said in unison. The voice came from Leo beside me, and from the shadow at the top of the stairs, a terrifying stereo effect that filled the entire house. I knew in that moment that running wasn't an option. The house had sealed us in. We were trapped with something that had been feeding on its own rage for years, waiting for this exact moment to claim what was owed. I didn't wait to see if the shadow at the top of the stairs would take a step down. Survival instinct, raw and animalistic, hijacked my brain. I grabbed the thing that looked like my brother by the wrist. His skin was ice cold, like grabbing a handful of snow. We're leaving, I choked out. The doors won't open, Alex, Leo, or the thing wearing Leo's face, said calmly. He didn't resist, he just let me drag him, his feet sliding uselessly over the hardwood floor like a rag doll. I sprinted for the front door, the heavy oak entrance that was our main escape route. I threw the deadbolt back and yanked the handle with both hands. It didn't budge. It wasn't locked. It felt fused. Like the wood of the door had grown into the frame, becoming a solid wall. I kicked it, slammed my shoulder against it, screaming in frustration. Nothing. I told you, Leo said. He was standing behind me, tilting his head. The house is holding its breath. I spun around, chest heaving. Stop saying that. Stop talking like him. I grabbed the heavy brass umbrella stand from the corner and swung it at the narrow window beside the door. Glass should shatter. That's how physics works. Thud. The brass bounced off the glass as if I had hit a sheet of transparent steel. Not a crack. Not a scratch. I looked through the pane. Outside, the world was gone. There were no trees, no driveway, no storm. Just a swirling, gray mist pressing against the glass, churning like smoke. The house wasn't in the Midwest anymore. We were drifting in a void. Okay, I whispered, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the umbrella stand. Okay. Garage. The garage door opener. I grabbed Leo again. This time, he dug his heels in. I don't want to go to the garage, he whined. For a second, he sounded like himself, a scared 5-year-old. It's dark in there. We have to, Leo. Come on. I hauled him through the kitchen. The air was getting colder, seeing your breath cold. The lights in the kitchen were buzzing loudly, popping one by one as we passed under them, showering sparks onto the granite countertops. I shoved open the door to the garage. It was pitch black. The smell of gasoline and damp concrete hit me. I slapped the wall switch. Nothing. The power was out in this part of the house. I fumbled for my phone. The screen was cracked from when I dropped it, but the flashlight still worked. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dusty concrete floor, the shelves of tools, and my parents' SUV. Get in the car, I ordered, pulling the back door open. I shoved Leo into the back seat and buckled him in. He sat there, staring straight ahead, his hands folded in his lap. I jumped into the driver's seat. My keys were in the ignition. Mom always left a spare set in the glove box. I grabbed them, jammed the key in, and turned it. Click. 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 Dead battery. No, no, no. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel. Come on. I tried again. Click. Then, the locks on the car doors snapped down. Thunk. I looked in the rearview mirror. Leo wasn't in the back seat anymore. The seatbelt was still buckled, looped around empty air. Leo. I pulled the handle of my door. Locked. I yanked the lock pin up, but it snapped back down instantly, as if an invisible finger was pushing it. Then, the radio turned on. It was static at first, loud and screeching. Then, a voice cut through. A man's voice, deep and distorted, like a record playing at half speed. Rule number 1, hide and seek. The voice shifted, becoming higher, mocking. It was Leo's voice now. If you find me before midnight, you can keep the body. If I find you first, I keep it. The digital clock on the dashboard flickered. 11:15 p.m. 45 minutes. Where are you? I screamed at the dashboard. Warmer. Warmer. The radio taunted. Suddenly, the garage door opener motor on the ceiling sparked and caught fire. A small flame, but enough to trigger the smoke. I had to get out of the car. I kicked the driver's side window with both feet, bracing my back against the passenger door. Once. Twice. On the third kick, the safety glass shattered. I scrambled out of the window, cutting my arm on a shard of glass. I didn't feel the pain. Adrenaline was a drug, and I was overdosing on it. I ran back into the kitchen. The house was changing. The hallway seemed longer than it should be. The shadows cast by the furniture looked like they were reaching out, trying to trip me. Warmer, whispered the walls. I stopped. I needed a weapon. A real one. I ran to the kitchen drawers. I pulled out the biggest chef's knife we had. The steel gleamed in the dim light of my phone. It felt heavy in my hand. Ridiculous, maybe, you can't stab a ghost, but it made me feel less helpless. I moved into the living room. It was empty. The TV was on, displaying nothing but blue static. Then I heard it. A giggle. Coming from the basement door. My stomach dropped. The basement was an unfinished concrete dungeon full of storage boxes and the furnace. It was the heart of the house's noises. I walked toward the door. It was slightly ajar. Leo. I whispered. Help me, Alex, a small voice cried from the bottom of the stairs. It's dark. He's hurting me. It sounded like Leo. The real Leo. The terrified little brother I was supposed to protect. I'm coming, I said, gripping the knife. I stepped onto the first stair. The wood groaned. I descended into the dark, my phone light cutting a cone of visibility ahead of me. The air down here smelled different. Not just musty. It smelled like sulfur and copper. Like old blood. I reached the bottom. The basement was a maze of cardboard boxes stacked high. Leo, keep talking so I can find you, I said. I'm here, the voice said. It was coming from the far corner, behind the furnace. I navigated through the maze of boxes. I saw a clearing in the corner. There was an old armchair there, one my dad had thrown out years ago. Sitting in the chair was a figure. I raised the light. It was a mannequin. An old dressmaker's dummy my mom used for sewing. But someone had dressed it in Leo's pajamas. And pinned to the chest of the dummy was a Polaroid photo. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled the photo off. It was a picture of me and Leo, taken last Christmas. We were smiling in front of the tree. But in the photo, standing directly behind us, was a third boy. He looked exactly like me, but his eyes were scratched out with a black marker. And his mouth was open in a silent scream. I flipped the photo over. Written in red crayon. We share the same blood. We should share the same life. Do you like it? I spun around. Leo was standing at the bottom of the stairs, blocking my exit. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my shadow on the concrete wall. You have something that belongs to him, Alex, Leo said. His voice was vibrating, two voices speaking at once, high and low. What do I have? I raised the knife, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I don't have anything. Life, Leo smiled. You lived. He didn't. Leo took a step forward. The light from my phone flickered and died. Total darkness. I heard the scratch of footsteps on concrete. They were coming from everywhere. From the left, from the right, from the ceiling. Run, Alex, Leo's voice giggled in the dark, moving around me like a surround sound speaker. Run, rabbit, run. I swung the knife blindly in the dark, hitting nothing but air. I needed light. I needed to see. I remembered the old lighter in my pocket, I'd confiscated it from a kid at school last week and never threw it away. I dug it out and flicked the flint. A small, yellow flame erupted. It wasn't enough to light the room, but it was enough to see the face that was now inches from mine. It wasn't Leo. It was a boy who looked like me at 17, but his skin was gray and rotting, and his neck was wrapped in a purple, fleshy cord. The entity, Caleb, grinned, his teeth black and jagged. "Tag," he whispered. He blew out the lighter. Darkness didn't just fill the basement, it had weight. It pressed against my eardrums like deep water. When the lighter went out, I didn't scream. My throat had seized shut. The smell of rot, sweet, cloying decay mixed with old lavender soap, was suffocating. "Tag." The whisper lingered in the air, vibrating against the skin of my neck. I lunged forward, not toward the stairs, but sideways, crashing into a stack of cardboard boxes. I needed to put something, anything, between me and the thing that wore my dead brother's name. "You're not real," I gasped, scrambling on hands and knees over concrete that felt wet and slick. "You're a hallucination. Carbon monoxide poisoning. That's what this is." A laugh echoed from the darkness. It wasn't one voice. It was a chorus. Leo's high-pitched giggle layered over a guttural, wet rasp. "Real enough to touch," the voice said from directly above me. I rolled onto my back and kicked upward blindly. My foot connected with something solid, something soft and yielding, like a ribcage under wet wool. A hiss of pain erupted from the dark. I didn't wait. I scrambled for the stairs, my fingernails tearing against the wood as I hauled myself up. The steps felt wrong. Too steep. Too many of them. It felt like climbing out of a grave. Something cold clamped around my ankle. I shrieked, kicking wildly with my other foot. The grip tightened, fingers digging into my flesh with impossible strength. It wasn't trying to pull me down, it was trying to climb up me. "Let go!" I screamed, slamming my heel down. I heard a sickening crunch, like stepping on a dry branch. The grip loosened. I threw myself through the basement door and slammed it shut, throwing my body weight against it. I fumbled for the lock, my fingers slick with sweat and grime. Click. I slid down to the floor, panting, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. But the house was silent again. Too silent. I looked down at the hallway. The perspective was warped. The corridor looked stretched, elongated like a tunnel. The family photos lining the walls were wrong. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked to the nearest picture. It was a photo of my 5th birthday party. Me, Mom, and Dad. I leaned closer. In the photo, my face was gone. Someone had taken a cigarette lighter and burned a hole right where my head should be. And standing in the background, in the shadow of the porch, was a blurry figure. A boy. Smiling. I checked the next photo. My graduation picture. My face was burned out again. Every single picture. My existence was being erased, systematically, image by image. "He wants your life, Alex," a voice whispered. I spun around. Leo was standing at the end of the hallway, by the stairs leading up to the bedrooms. He was holding a pair of scissors. "Leo." I took a step toward him. "Put the scissors down, buddy." Leo looked at me. His eyes were back to normal, blue and terrified. Tears were streaming down his face. "I can't," Leo sobbed, his voice trembling. "He's making me hold them. He says only one big brother can fit in the house." "Who says that?" "The other one. He's inside." Leo tapped his own chest with the hand that wasn't holding the scissors. He's cold, Alex. He's so cold. Fight him, Leo. You're stronger than him. No. Leo screamed, his voice distorting again into that dual-tone nightmare. I am not stronger. I am the mistake. He was the first. Leo raised the scissors, pointing the blades toward his own throat. No. I lunged forward. Leo, or Caleb, sprinted up the stairs with unnatural speed, laughing that terrible, wet laugh. I chased him. The stairs groaned under my feet. The house felt like it was tilting, the angles of the walls shifting to disorient me. I reached the landing. The door to the bathroom was open. The light was on, the only light working in the entire house. I stopped. I had to stop. Because I saw myself. The bathroom mirror was facing the hallway. And in the reflection, I saw me. But I wasn't standing in the hallway. The reflection of Alex was inside the bathroom, leaning against the sink, casually cleaning dirt from under his fingernails with a small knife. I looked down at my own body. I was standing in the hall. I looked back at the mirror. The Alex in the glass looked up and locked eyes with me. He smiled. It was a predator's smile. Cold. Calculating. You look tired, Alex, the reflection said. His lips moved in perfect sync with the sound, but my lips were pressed shut. What are you? I whispered. The reflection leaned closer to the glass, misting it up from the inside. I'm the version of you that survived the womb. The strong one. You. You're just the placeholder. The backup copy Mom and Dad made because they were lonely. That's a lie. Is it? The reflection laughed. Why do you think they work so much? Why do you think they leave you alone in this big, empty house? They can't stand to look at you. You remind them of me. I felt a crack in my mind. A fracture. Was he right? Was this why I always felt like an outsider in my own family? No, I said, shaking my head. You're just a ghost. A dead thing. The reflection's face twisted in rage. I am not dead. I am just, waiting. The Alex in the mirror raised his hand and slammed it against the glass. Crack. A spiderweb fracture appeared on the surface. Not from my side. From his side. He hit it again. Smash. A shard of glass fell onto the bathroom floor. He was breaking out. I didn't wait to see him step through. I turned and ran toward Leo's room. The door was shut. Leo. I pounded on the door. Open up. He's almost here, Alex. Leo's voice came from inside, weak and fading. The closet is opening. I tried the handle. Locked. I stepped back and kicked the door right next to the lock. The wood splintered, but held. I could hear the sound of glass crunching behind me in the hallway. The thing from the mirror was walking toward me. Open the door. I screamed, throwing my shoulder against it. Crack. The door frame gave way. I stumbled into the room. It was freezing inside. So cold my breath came out in thick white clouds. Leo was sitting in the center of the room, inside a circle made of salt. No. Ash. And the closet door, the one with the slats, was wide open. But it wasn't a closet anymore. The back wall of the closet was gone. Instead, there was a tunnel. A long, fleshy, pulsating tunnel that looked like the inside of a throat. And at the end of that tunnel, deep in the dark, 2 red eyes were glowing. Leo looked up at me. He looked exhausted. Pale. Fading. He wants to trade, Alex, Leo whispered. He says if I go in there, he'll let you go. I looked at the tunnel, then back at the hallway where the other Alex stood in the doorway, holding a shard of mirror like a dagger. I realized then what the game was. It wasn't hide and seek. It was king of the hill. And there was only room for one of us on top. No trading, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I walked over to Leo and kicked the line of ash, breaking the circle. The house screamed. A high-pitched, structural shriek of twisting metal and breaking wood. The other Alex, in the doorway roared and charged. I grabbed Leo, pulled him to my chest, and turned my back to the closet, facing the monster that wore my face. You want a body? I yelled at the doppelganger. Come and take it. But as the other Alex lunged, the suction from the closet, the tunnel, suddenly reversed. It wasn't blowing cold air out anymore. It was inhaling. The sound wasn't wind anymore. It was an intake of breath, vast and terrible, coming from the throat of the house itself. The closet wasn't just a hole in the wall, it was a wound in reality. The fleshy tunnel pulsed, expanding and contracting with a wet, rhythmic thud that matched my own heartbeat. Let me go. Leo screamed, his small hands clawing at my forearms. But it wasn't Leo's voice. It was a distorted, dual-toned shriek, half child, half something ancient and angry. I held on to him with everything I had. My boots scraped against the floorboards as the vacuum force dragged us toward the open maw of the closet. Toys, books, and the shattered remains of the door frame flew past us, sucked into the darkness. You can't save him. The thing that looked like me, the mirror Alex, roared over the gale. He was clinging to the doorframe of the bedroom, his body horizontal, fighting the pull of the void. His skin was beginning to crack, spiderweb fractures appearing on his cheeks and forehead like broken porcelain. He belongs to the house. He belongs to us. He's my brother. I yelled back, spitting dust and drywall from my mouth. He's not a spare part. I looked down at Leo. His eyes were rolling back in his head, showing only the whites. The ash circle I had kicked apart was swirling around us in a gray cyclone. I realized then that the entity had made a mistake. It had spent so much energy trying to manifest, trying to become real, that it had made itself vulnerable to the same physical laws it was trying to break. The closet didn't want Leo. The closet wanted a soul to fill the empty space. It didn't care whose. I looked at the mirror Alex. He was struggling, his fingers slipping on the wood. He was terrified. For all his posturing, he was just a reflection that had stepped out of the glass, and now the glass was trying to pull him back in. I made a choice. A stupid, reckless choice. I let go of the heavy oak bedpost I was using as an anchor with one hand, keeping my other arm locked around Leo. I pushed off the floor. I didn't jump away from the closet. I jumped toward the mirror Alex. For a second, we were suspended in the air, two identical faces staring at each other. One terrified and exhausted, the other cracking and hateful. I slammed my shoulder into his chest. Tag, I whispered. The impact broke his grip on the doorframe. The scream he let out wasn't human. It was the sound of a mirror shattering in a cathedral, a million sharp, ringing notes of destruction. The vacuum caught him. I grabbed the edge of the doorframe just as he flew past me, tumbling head over heels into the fleshy tunnel. I saw his body distort, stretching like taffy, his arms elongating, his jaw unhinging as he was pulled into the red-eyed darkness. He vanished. And then, with a sound like a thunderclap, the closet door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I fell to the floor, gasping for air, clutching Leo to my chest. The room was still freezing. My breath misted in the air. Leo. I shook him gently. Leo, wake up. He didn't move. He felt like a block of ice. Please, I whispered, tears cutting tracks through the dust on my face. Please, don't be gone. Don't be Caleb. Be Leo. Slowly, painfully slowly, his eyelids fluttered. He looked up at me. His eyes were blue. Just blue. The darkness was gone. Alex, he croaked, his voice small and raspy. I had a bad dream. The man in the wall, he was crying. I pulled him into a hug so tight I thought I might break him. It's okay. He's gone. It's over. I looked at the closet door. It was just a door again. White paint, slightly chipped. But I knew better. I stood up, found a heavy dresser, and dragged it in front of the closet. Then I carried Leo out of the room, down the stairs, and into the living room. We didn't go back upstairs that night. We sat on the couch, wrapped in every blanket we could find, watching the sun slowly bleach the sky gray, then pink, then gold. Sunday, 10 a.m. The sound of gravel crunching under tires woke me up. I jerked awake. I was clutching the baseball bat. Leo was asleep, his head on my lap. The front door opened. Hello. Boys. We're back. Mom's voice. Cheerful. Normal. Dad walked in carrying 2 suitcases. He looked tired but happy. Wow, look at this place. Did a tornado hit inside? He gestured to the scattered books and the overturned chairs. I stood up, my legs stiff. I didn't know what to say. Hey Dad, your dead son tried to eat your living son, and I threw my evil twin into a dimension of hell in the closet. We built a fort, I stammered, my voice sounding rusty. It got a little out of hand. Mom walked over and kissed my forehead. She frowned. You're freezing, Alex. Is the heat off? Yeah, I lied. Must be. She looked down at Leo, who was rubbing his eyes and yawning. And how was my little man? Did you behave for your brother? Leo looked at Mom. Then he looked at Dad. Then he looked at me. He smiled. It was the sweetest, most innocent smile I had ever seen. Alex took good care of me, Leo said. We played hide and seek. I won. Mom laughed and picked him up. That's my boy. Come on, let's get some breakfast. I'm starving. They walked into the kitchen, chatting about the conference and the traffic on the I-90. Normal. Everything was perfectly normal. I stayed in the living room for a moment. I needed to wash my face. I needed to scrub the feeling of the other Alex's skin off my shoulder. I walked to the hallway bathroom, the one downstairs. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face. It felt grounding. Real. I grabbed a towel and dried off. Then, I looked up at the mirror. My reflection looked back. Tired, dark circles under the eyes, a cut on the cheek from the glass. But it was me. It mimicked my movements perfectly. I blinked, it blinked. I sighed, it sighed. It's over, I whispered to the glass. I turned off the light and walked toward the kitchen to join my family. But as I reached the doorway, I stopped. Leo was sitting at the island, eating a bowl of cereal. He was laughing at something Dad said. The morning sun was streaming through the sliding glass door, the one I had barricaded the night before. The light hit Leo from the side, casting a long, sharp shadow across the granite countertop. I stared at the shadow. Leo was holding a spoon in his right hand. He was bringing it to his mouth. But his shadow. The shadow on the counter wasn't holding a spoon. The shadow's hands were empty. And one of its fingers, the pointer finger, was raised, pressed against where the shadow's lips would be. Shoo! Leo turned his head and caught me staring. His blue eyes locked onto mine. For a fraction of a second, just a heartbeat, the blue flickered. A flash of black. A void. "Alex?" Mom asked, pouring coffee. "You want some toast?" Leo smiled at me. He tapped the spoon against the bowl. Ding. 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 "Yeah," Leo said softly, his voice dropping just a little too low, sounding just a little too old. "Sit down, brother. We have so much catching up to do." I looked at the shadow. The shadow waved. I walked into the kitchen and pulled out a chair. The cold wasn't gone. It had just moved in. "Yeah," I said, my voice trembling as I picked up a knife to butter my toast. "I'm starving."